Some things are meant to stay forgotten. When they are disturbed, they remember you. This is the story of a man whose curiosity led him to uncover an ancient horror, and that was always watching, waiting for someone to notice it again. Liam Parker had always been the kind of man who needed answers. Growing up in a small rural town in the Midwest, he had never believed in ghosts or the supernatural. Raised by his father, stern and practical man, Liam had been taught to trust facts, not feelings. His father's sudden death when Liam was 15 had changed him, though, left him with questions that science couldn't answer. And it was this hunger for answers that brought Liam to a small, forgotten cabin deep in the woods. The cabin had belonged to his uncle, a man he had never met but heard plenty of whispers about. After his father's passing, Liam learned that his uncle had died under strange circumstances, alone, in that very cabin, miles away from civilization. No one knew what had truly happened, but there were rumors of something unnatural in those woods. In the early 2000s, Liam inherited the cabin after his uncle's death. Driven by the desire to know more about his uncle's mysterious life, and even more mysterious death, he decided to visit the property. He thought it would be an ordinary trip, just another piece of family history to uncover. But as soon as he arrived, something felt wrong. The cabin was barely standing, a relic from another time. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the surrounding trees seemed to close in on the small structure, as if trying to hide it from the world. The locals warned him not to go, claiming that the woods were haunted. But Liam didn't listen. He set up camp for the weekend, thinking it would be a quick trip. What he found inside changed everything. Inside the cabin, Liam found something odd. His uncle had left behind a series of journals, but the entries were cryptic, full of ramblings about the Watcher. At first, it seemed like the writings of a man losing his mind, references to an ancient presence that watched from the trees, an entity that had been there long before the cabin was built. His uncle wrote about hearing whispers in the night, seeing shadowy figures out of the corner of his eye. Liam shrugged it off, thinking his uncle had been paranoid. But that night, things took a darker turn. As he lay in bed, Liam heard something outside. The sound of twigs snapping, leaves crunching, as if someone or something was walking around the cabin. He tried to rationalize it. Perhaps a deer or the wind, but the footsteps were too deliberate, too slow. The following day, Liam found a strange symbol carved into the trees surrounding the cabin. Intricate design, unlike anything he'd ever seen. That night, footsteps returned. This time, they were closer. Liam could feel it now. The presence his uncle had written about. There was something in the woods, something that was watching him, waiting for him to acknowledge it. As he stood by the window, peering into the darkness, he saw a figure, tall and shadowy, standing just beyond the tree line. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, but then it moved, slowly, deliberately, as if daring him to come closer. Next day, Liam found the same symbol from the trees carved into the cabin door. It was as though something had marked him, just like it had marked his uncle. Liam's rational mind began to unravel. He was no longer sure if what he was seeing was real or if it was his mind playing tricks on him. The journal entries kept haunting him, his uncle's final words, warning anyone who found the cabin to never acknowledge the Watcher. The more you noticed it, the stronger it became. Liam started experiencing strange visions, glimpses of his uncle's final days. In one terrifying vision, he saw his uncle running through the woods, trying to escape something that was always just behind him. No matter how fast he ran, he could never outrun it. It became clear that the Watcher was not a ghost or a simple haunting. It was something much older, much darker, an ancient presence tied to the land itself, a guardian of sorts that fed on fear. The more Liam feared it, the more powerful it became, and the closer it got. Liam's dreams were filled with images of his uncle, screaming, clawing at the cabin walls as shadows surrounded him. Now it was happening to Liam. He could feel it. The Watcher wasn't just outside the cabin anymore. It was inside, watching him from the shadows, waiting for him to break. On his last night in the cabin, Liam could no longer ignore it. Footsteps came again, but this time, he didn't stop at the door. He entered the cabin, slow and methodical. The floor creaked under the weight of something invisible. Liam stood frozen, his breath shallow as the temperature in the room dropped. Couldn't see it, but he could feel it. Cold, heavy presence that loomed over him, watching. Then, without warning, the whispers began. Soft at first, then louder, more frantic, as if hundreds of voices were speaking at once. They were telling him to leave, to run, but his legs wouldn't move. Liam's mind broke. Final journal entry from his uncle echoed in his head. It's not real until you see it. Once you see it, you belong to it. As Liam collapsed onto the floor, whispers faded, replaced by a deafening silence. When he opened his eyes, he was no longer in the cabin. He was in the woods, standing where he had first seen the Watcher. This time, he wasn't alone. A figure stood before him, faceless, its hollow eyes staring into his soul. And then, everything went dark. Did Liam escape, or did he become part of the Watcher's endless cycle? Some places are meant to stay forgotten. Once they remember you, they never let go. What do you think happened to Liam? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories from the dark corners of the world.